no fault of your own, when you have booked for yourself and your friends to go and stay in a hotel, why should you end up in a situation where you're out of pocket as a result of that because of a gas explosion or a fire that occurred in that hotel? Well, I wanted to get some legal advice for you in terms of whether or not you would be able to potentially take legal action against Daish's Holidays for full reimbursement of your losses. And I'm very pleased to say Nick Freeman, the lawyer known as Mr. Loophole, he's on the other line now. Good morning to you, Nick.
Good morning, Jonathan.
Good morning.
Good morning, Pat.
So obviously Pat and her friends are out of pocket at the moment to the tune of thousands of pounds, because you've got Rosemary's mobility scooter that was destroyed. You've got all of Pat, Rosemary and John's clothes and personal possessions that were in the rooms at the time. And according to Daish's Holidays, they seem to feel that it's reasonable for guests to make a claim on their home insurance policy. What's your view on this?
I don't agree with that view. What they're also saying, Jonathan, to be fair to them, is that they are conducting, or their insurers are conducting an investigation in relation to the cause of the explosion or the cause of the fire, which they're clearly entitled to do. The hotel owe a duty of care to their guests, and dependent upon the results of that investigation, I mean, it would appear, and we don't want to prejudge this, but it would appear that there's been an innocent explosion. We don't know what the cause is behind that explosion, but it doesn't appear, I would imagine it wasn't terrorist related. If, for example, God forbid, someone had planted a bomb there and it was nothing to do with the hotel or their lacks of security, then they may have an argument to say, look, this wasn't our fault and we're not in breach of our duty of due care. But assuming that there is a maintenance problem, which is the root cause of the explosion, then of course they would be liable, and they will be liable for all the damages that flow from cancellation of the rest of the holiday, the loss of possessions, and also your pain and suffering and shock. So it's not just confined to material things, it's also extended to an emotional level, because people who are involved in an explosion are entitled to be compensated for it. So my advice at this stage will be to allow them a reasonable amount of time. I will be writing to them and asking them how long it would take for the insurance to complete their investigation. They must have an idea. It's not, I imagine, a very complex thing. They should be able to indicate very quickly whether there's an external force, whether it's simply the explosion of a boiler or something like that. They should give you that indication. I also think that it is a good idea to notify your own insurance company and point out that this is what happened. I have no intentions of making a claim against you, but I'm just putting you on notice, because they might say, well, actually, thank you very much. We'll pursue this on your behalf against Daish. But at least you're preserving your position in case, for example, the hotel chain is not in breach of its duty of care. And I don't want to prejudge it, so I'm not going to say whether it will or it won't be, but they do owe a duty of care, and the first thing is to establish whether or not they're in breach of that duty of care. If they are liable for everything. If they're not, then it's a very different situation. So that really is the position. I don't know how long it will take. I'd want to find out how long it's going to take, and then we have to wait and see what happens.
The last response that I have had from them, because I asked them the question, knowing that I was going to be speaking to you today, Nick, I asked them the questions that you had requested me to ask them regarding the details for their insurance company. They have not provided those. Instead, they've come back and said, unfortunately, the cause of the Claremont hotel fire remains unknown at this time. But we want to reassure you that a comprehensive investigation is being conducted by the East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service and associated agencies. Daish's Holidays is currently awaiting the results of this investigation, which we trust will identify the cause of the fire. Once this has been established, updating our guests will be our number one priority. For guests affected by the fire who do not have valid holiday insurance or suitable personal insurance, as a gesture of goodwill, Daish's Holidays has personally undertaken to immediately refund 50% of their holiday costs. We would like to clarify this payment is being made directly by Daish's For until liability has been established, no third-party insurance claims may be pursued. Once we know more about the circumstances of the fire, we will do all we can to advise and support guests in their claims against the relevant insurance company in order to help them recover their losses.
Yeah. So that payment's going to be made without prejudice, and it's made out of their own pocket as opposed to out of the insurance pocket. So I would be writing, Pat, to them and saying, could you please tell me who your insurers are? And ask them the question, how long do you anticipate it's going to take? You could also write to the relevant fire company concerned, saying that you were a guest at the hotel. We understand that you're investigating it. Would you please advise how long the investigation is going to take? And you can also ask for a copy of the report. I'm not sure whether they'll provide that, because at the moment they're acting for the hotel, but it should be something that's in the public arena. There shouldn't be any privilege or confidentiality attached to it, because obviously it's very much in the public interest to know the cause of something which affects members of the public. So I would do those two things.
Okay.
And I would also, you do have house insurance, and I know Jonathan said that it's house insurance and it won't relate. The fact, for example, I imagine there will be certain things on your house insurance that will cover you for items when you're away. For example, if you have a watch or something like that, they're typically covered, or any jewellery or other possessions, your clothes, that these insurance policies normally cover you when you're away. Of course, I understand your reluctance to claim, and I wouldn't claim, but I would just put the insurance company on notice as to the position. So you're preserving your position. You don't, at the end of the day, want to be out of pocket. And of course, if push comes to shove, and I don't imagine this is going to be the situation, but if the explosion was as a consequence of a boiler explosion or something of that sort, and they dig in and say, look, you've got your own insurance claim on that, you would be able to pursue an action against Daesh personally, their particular company. You would be able to take them to court. But I don't anticipate that is what is necessary in this case. I imagine that it will be resolved amicably, because I don't expect Daesh's insurers will have an argument. They'll simply have to say, look, this is what's happened. Their argument might be with Daesh, for example, for saying that they might say, well, look, I'm not saying this is the situation, but if proper maintenance checks haven't been carried out on the boiler, the insurance may say, well, I'm sorry, we're not going to indemnify you. And that, of course, would be an area of concern. But then Daesh would have to pay out of their own pocket.
Do you think...
all the items, materialistic and other items, and what you could possibly do with doing, I mean, I don't know whether you've sustained any injuries, Pat, or what your...
I didn't, but John did.
Okay. You probably need to get some legal advice in terms of what is a reasonable amount to expect for the injuries and the shock that you suffered. So you need to detail every single item that went missing, work out what the costs are, and then you want some legal advice in relation to reasonable compensation for shock and injuries, which you're perfectly entitled to be compensated for.
And that would be using, what, a personal injury lawyer?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would go and see a personal injury lawyer who will be able to advise you in relation to that. I mean, I don't think you're going to need to get involved with the law, because I anticipate that this will be resolved amicably. Daesh's holidays have already employed a PR company. They don't want to come out of this smelling badly. It's very important for them. They're in a service industry, and I'm sure. But however they feel personally about it, they've got to be seen to be doing the right thing.
So do you suspect then...
You've had an unfortunate conversation with them on the phone, which is probably why they've got a PR company acting for them, because they shouldn't be having those sort of conversations with clients or customers who've been staying there. It's very unfortunate. But I imagine whatever happens, if they are in breach of their duty of care, you will be fully compensated for all your losses, plus compensation for injury and nervous shock.
And do you suspect that their reluctance to kind of outline that in writing is very deliberate at this stage, because they've been told by their insurer not to admit any liability until all of the kind of investigation has been concluded?
Well, and Jonathan, that has to be the right advice. Anybody will be saying at this stage, unless they know to the contrary, unless they know, look, we were told to get this boiler inspected and we didn't. But even so, it still might not be the cause. They are entitled to find out what the cause is. They're entitled to a reasonable amount of time it won't take long. And I would contact the fire brigade and the fire company or fire brigade and say, look, I understand you're conducting this. You can phone them up and ask them. They'll probably give you the answer over the phone. There's no reason why they should withhold it. And then you're in a position, you're kept abreast of the same information that the hotel companies are being kept informed of. So you might just have to be patient for a short while, but I expect you will get everything back, as I've indicated.
And if not, you believe Pat and Rosemary and John are in a strong position to pursue things legally?
You are, but you may find that you're insured under your own policy, and you've then got to decide if you have insurance under your own policy. That's what insurance policies are for. And my advice would be that you claim under your own policies, even though that means your premiums will go up, etc., etc. It's through no fault of yours. Not every insurance company would put it up, but when you have, for example, if you have a building and you have a burst, it's not anyone's fault. You have that, irrespective of fault. That's why you have insurance. You make a claim, inevitably your insurance premium will go up the next year, but that's just a fact of life with insurance, isn't it? You're not going to be out of pocket, but your policy may go up if you have to claim under your own policy. But I don't imagine that will be so in this
I would
case.
hope not. That seems a bit unfair to me.
It doesn't feel that way.
No. Well, okay. Well, look, we will obviously keep you, if you'll forgive the expression, in the loop, Nick, because it may well be that we will want to pick your brains again for a further legal perspective. But I think we now know what we need to do, and Pat knows now the letters that she needs to get written.
Yeah.
And let's just
prepare a careful list of get everything down, every item, so it's there, price, replacement price, etc., etc., as I say, and work out a price so you know when you're going to contact them exactly what you're claiming for. Okay.
And in terms, just one final question. You mentioned her speaking to a personal injury lawyer.
Yeah.
Of course, there are many of us who would be a little worried about doing that, because the last thing we would want is for some kind of lawyer on a no-win, no-fee basis to try and get as much as they possibly could for stuff that we haven't even suffered. But how can you get good, independent, impartial advice on that?
Well, if you contact your local sort of solicitor's guide, there'll be a guide there. There'll be the SRA, the Solicitors Regulatory Authority, will be able to give you a guide, or the solicitors. The local law society will give you a guide as to the solicitors who specialise in this sort of work. And I'm not suggesting you engage somebody. I'm suggesting that you phone up and just pick someone's brain and say, look, this is the situation. I'm thinking of instructing you, because you are obviously at that stage. What do you suggest I do, and how much do you think this is worth? I've got no injuries, but I was, obviously suffered some sort of shock for it. I don't remember how I got from the hotel out onto the pier. They may say £500, they may say £1,000, they may say a couple of £100. I don't know, but it's certainly worth something. You've then got the information. I don't think you will need to engage a lawyer, but if you do, then obviously it's a matter of choice for you. You find that the lawyers who are best recommended to you with a good reputation will do a good job. There are unfortunately some lawyers. Every lawyer does a different job. Obviously, you've got to work that out yourself, Pat. You go on recommendation.
All right. Listen, Nick, as always, thank you so much for your help. Really useful. Nick Freeman, otherwise known as Mr. Loophole, thank you very much indeed. So, Pat,